you can very well apply safety without making too much of a compromise on commercial requirements.
Right.
You can't just throw the company out of business for safety. Now, we do criticize technology, but at the same time, if you look at how technology has made engines much more efficient.
Absolutely.
How we use technology is what is going to define whether it's useful or harmful. Back in the 40s and 50s, when nuclear energy was just coming in, there were people who did a lot of thinking on how the fission reaction is going to be used, whether it's going to be used to bomb another country or another people,
right,
or it's going to be used
to
for having energy.
Hello everybody, I'm extremely excited to invite today's guest, Captain Hanesh Narang. Captain Narang has had a very rich career of spanning about 40 years in the maritime industry, where he started off as a cadet in 81. He was the 81-82 Rajendra batch from training ship Rajendra and has sailed on oil tankers, a couple of bulk carriers and chemical tankers as well, but mostly on oil tankers for over 20 years until he quit sea in 2003 and came down as a DPA and CSO. And since 2003, for the last 20 years, he's been in charge in various companies as DPA, CSO, head of vetting, head of safety and quality. And we rarely have somebody who's got so much experience in safety. So I'm very, very excited to start today's podcast and looking forward to what we can gain and what we can get from his experience. Captain Narang, most welcome to our studio and warm welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for a very generous introduction. Yes, you just reminded me that I've been 40 years in the business. That's fairly long. That tells my age. Yes, so
it's really, yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you. And I hope whoever watches this podcast has something to gain from it.
Absolutely. I'm very sure that all of our viewers would be excited to hear what you have got to say. So, I mean, I'd just like to start off. I mean, how does it feel? I mean, people of our generation, for example, I've joined C in 98, and by that time ISM was already structured to a large extent, and so when we complain about changes, you know, I feel this is nothing as compared to the change which you have seen. I mean, ISM coming into force, SIRE coming into force, all these are huge. So how was life before ISM? This is
well, before ISM, safety basically depended upon individuals. You still had captains and chief engineers and chief mates who focused a lot on safety, who were very safety conscious, and some of them had actually faced very serious incidents at sea, which got them thinking about safety, but there was no uniformity. So you had one person who's extremely safety conscious.
Right.
And then the next person, for him, safety meant nothing.
Right.
And in general, the overall focus on safety was not there in shipping,
Okay.
I must say.
Okay.
We all depended a lot upon our own experiences. And people would just say that they've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
And they had enough experience and they didn't like being told
Right.
how to do it. So if it worked for 10 years or 20 years for them,
That was the normal.
It's going to work forever.
Right. Yeah.
But if they ran into an accident, then they were not there to tell the story.
Right.
I would just mention that we were 232 Indians in our batch of TS Rajendra, and we have some Iranians and some other nationalities.
Iranians, you said? Okay.
Yes,
that's
right.
Okay.
We had about 12 Iranians in our batch, and we were 232 Indians, I think, and then there were some boys from Maldives, some from Mauritius, I'm not too sure. We were a batch of 250. Now, during our cadetship, 2 boys died.
Two boys died?
In 2 separate incidents.
I see. Okay.
And if you look at it from today and the practices that exist today, both the lives were, I would say, a waste, deaths, easily preventable. So 2 out of 232 is just under 1%.
Yes. Oh, wow.
Within the first 3 years of the sea career.
My God. I see.
So.
And would you say this was the norm across other countries as well, or is this some kind of a one-off incident which happened in that batch or something like that?
No, I don't think that was the case. As a matter of fact, the next batch, the TS Rajendra 1982-83 batch, the President's Gold Medal winner of that batch, he too was killed in an accident.
Oh God, I see.
And in a very violent accident, in the sense an explosion.
Oh God.
He was a chief mate when that happened.
I see.
So the general track record at that time was not so good.
Not so good. Right.
Today, the things that we take for granted, like you should be wearing leather safety gloves when you're working.
Yeah.
These things didn't exist at that time, at least for cadets.
I see.
We were told, you are boys, you got to become men.
Just work with your hands.
Tough hands.
Okay.
So no safety gloves for you.
My God.
So it was a different world.
Right.
If you had, so many times you did not have gas meters on board.
I see.
If you had gas meters, they were never calibrated. You didn't have calibration gases.
Oh God, I see.
So basically, when you were making a tank entry, you depended upon your sense of smell.
My God, that's one standing from today's point of view, it seems so much of a distant past, this is unimaginable almost. Okay.
Yes, and that's when, it really surprises me when people complain.
Yeah.
And people of my generation complain about the requirements of safety today.
Right.
And they say it's too restrictive, it's too much of paperwork. It doesn't bring about any change.
Right.
It doesn't make life any safer, simpler. So it's quite surprising. They have seen it all. They have seen those things.
Absolutely.
And they are still blind to the fact
that how much value this has added to, and
it's been a slow process.
Okay.
It's been a slow process. Could have been faster. And then in certain sectors of the industry, it has been faster than the other sectors.
Right.
Like I would say the oil tanker business.
Right.
Took it very seriously.
Okay.
Which involved also the initiatives of the oil industry.
Right.
The oil majors, the SIRE inspections.
Right.
Then the TMSA, tank management and self-assessment. So all these things, they played a big role.
Right.
And since the progress is so gradual, sometimes we don't see it. We don't see it and we don't appreciate it.
Right.
But if you sit back and start thinking about how life was then and how life is now,
it's two different worlds, you're saying.
I know the principles of safety are applied differently in different companies.
Right.
There's still not as much uniformity as the regulators
Would
and
expect,
industry would want.
Would want, yes. But still it is much higher than what used to happen earlier. So it's at least the minimum standard has raised.
The minimum standard is up.
Right.
The minimum standard is certainly up.
Right. Wonderful. I mean, that's but even before SIRE, I believe for the tanker industry, OPA 90 played a big role, right? Exxon Valdez in 1990 was probably the first time that tanker industry had to take it more seriously for them, right? Is it?
So with OPA 90, two things happened. And one of them was that alcohol got focus. Consumption of alcohol on ships came into focus. And second thing was double hull vessels.
Right. Okay.
So if you look at the history of shipping industry, let's say right from the Titanic onwards, up to OPA 90 and even today. So whenever there was an accident, there was a reaction to it, and rules and regulations came in as a reaction.
Yes. We are a very reactive industry that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, this industry has given me everything. My whole life has been spent in this industry, but still I would say that yes, there's a lot more that can be done in this industry.
Right.
So throughout, from the time of, let's say, history of shipping, let's say from Titanic onwards, every time regulations came in, those regulations were about the construction of the vessel.
Okay.
Or improving the construction, improving the equipment. That's where they kept concentrating.
Okay.
The concentration was never on the software. It was only on the hardware.
On the hardware. Right.
So slowly with the ISM, and let's say ISM is basically about how you operate a vessel.
Sure. Yeah.
It's ISM code is nothing about the equipment or the construction.
Right.
So the focus is now shifted. Now means, when I say now, I mean from the 90s. The focus has shifted to operations of the ship,
right?
The software, the manpower. The focus has shifted to that rather than just the equipment and
having the right equipment. Yeah, that's a. I mean, I think that's one of the perfect ways to put it across, that this is a very different focus that we have today, and I think it's increasing even more in our industry, that they're trying to narrow down that gap of the human element is coming a lot into focus, and also I believe to a large extent the industry still does not factor in the change in psychology which has happened due to the invent of the digital age. Attention spans getting lesser and lesser, people's patience on following a particular, in every other way also, but particularly in following a certain procedure, I would say probably was different in the 90s or in the 2000s as compared to the young, especially the young generation that is coming into. And I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying it's different, and probably it should be one of the discussions we might have.
Yes, sure, it's a subject of discussion. However, I want to mention one thing, that when in the early 80s I joined shipping, all the people who were 15 years older than us,
right,
they all had to say that we were very good during our time and you guys are no good.
Of course.
And then say around the early 90s, when we started becoming masters, we said that the next generation is simply useless.
For sure.
And we were much better. And now these boys who came in the 90s, in early 2000s, they started becoming the masters, and they said, whoever is coming now illegal.
No good, yes. That's a very standard complaint, and I don't think that leads anywhere. I mean, it's just an exercise.
But if you ask me honestly,
Yeah,
I look at today's second mates, and I look at today's chief mates, and I look at today's masters,
right,
and I think they're a lot more aware.
right,
They might lack a little bit in the practical aspects of it, but they know the theory much better than I did.
okay,
They put in many more hours than I did as a second mate and a third mate. As a second mate, if I made a passage plan with waypoint charts,
yeah,
the captain was very happy.
yeah, right,
Today, the second mate is calculating the tidal currents. He's looking at ocean currents. He is looking at, how he's going to pass a certain danger.
right.
He's looking at radial turns. He is
Wheel over
looking
points
at,
and
he's looking at wheel over positions. There's a lot more that's going into a passage planning today.
sure.
All that my generation did about passage planning was make a waypoint chart.
Right. But Captain Narang, would you say that the traffic was almost the same as what it is now? I mean, like say if you're entering Shanghai Harbor or you're entering Boston Channel, would you really have that much traffic that we have today in your time?
See, I don't have any data
Yeah. Okay.
on the subject,
Yeah.
but I do know that probably English Channel was the area that we really concentrated on at that time.
Okay.
And I think English Channel had a lot more traffic
Okay.
then than it has today. And there were a lot of ferries going across in the English Channel from Dover to Calais,
Dover to Calais. Yeah. Of course.
which you don't have today.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you've got the underground now.
Yeah.
I mean, you can just drive from this side to that side under the
you can
English
just
Channel.
drive
Yes.
under the channel.
Right. Right.
And then on the other hand, Singapore's freights wasn't so busy,
Absolutely.
say 25, 30 years.
Yeah, of course.
And then the amount of construction that's happening in
Right.
Singapore's freights.
Right.
And the amount of barges and tugs and tows that are crossing Singapore's freights.
Right.
So Singapore's freights has become
Obviously,
Tougher.
it's tougher.
the number of VLCCs at that time was very small. Ships had lesser draft. Today you have huge.
Of course. 21
Container
meters
vessels.
is just a normal 21, 25 sometimes, 23.
Of course,
yeah.
VLCCs, there was a spurt of VLCCs in late 60s and early 70s.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then it came down.
Okay.
Then the Suez Maxes. But in general, the draft of the vessels has gone up. The
Right.
size of the vessels has gone up.
Gone up. Right. Right.
And that's why the nature of traffic has changed.
Right.
And the concentration of traffic in different parts of the world
Yeah.
has changed.
Right.
But having said that, it's just that there was less information available at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Let's say for navigation, you had the mariner's handbook, you had the sailing directions. Probably you had this bridge team management
Right.
publication,
Publications. Yeah.
but I never saw it.
Okay.
I never saw it. In those
Yeah, so obviously now, and even apart from the publications with the age of the internet, I mean, information, you can exactly see how many vessels are crossing the Singapore Strait at this point of time if you want. I mean, that's somehow remarkable, and I can, I mean, completely relate to that probably what was happening in one part of the world at that time, 20, 40 years back, was transferred to another part of the world, this information, after through a lot of bureaucracy, through a lot of channels, and then after probably months to get a proper feedback. I mean, if you were to go to probably English channel at that point of time, you would have to depend on the information you're getting from the Mariner's Handbook, and apart from, I mean, there was no real-time information that would be available, right? Except from the VTS. I don't know if the VTS was still there or...
Well, VTS, again, the concept of VTS was just about developing in the 80s.
Okay.
Today you have, the VTS in Singapore is practically navigating the ship.
Absolutely. They're very, very cautious. I mean,
they're watching
tracking
you.
the ships. Yeah.
They're watching, and they have navigators sitting in the VTS. And each navigator on watch is assigned a few vessels.
Right.
So he's looking at every vessel. I crossed towards the later part of my career, say late 90s and early 2000s. I was only doing VLCCs through the Singapore Straits.
Okay.
And every now and then, if there was a vessel causing concern to me and I was looking at it, which was going to cross ahead of me,
right,
and at probably not a very comfortable distance,
right,
before I would call the vessel, the VTS would call the vessel and tell her, there's a VLCC, loaded VLCC going through.
Yeah.
Please stay out of the way. So VTS again has improved safety to a large extent.
Oh yes, absolutely. Could not agree more. So ISM came into force, and then as you were saying, this change did not happen dramatically, right? It happened over a slow process of what would you say, 5 to 7 years or something like that?
Yes, I think I underwent my first ISM audit sometime in 1970.
All right. Okay.
And the auditor himself was, rather than auditing me, he was training me, he was telling me what was ISM.
Okay.
And I was a master at that time when I underwent my first ISM, what we call SMC audit.
I see. Okay.
And that time we were just about learning what's being said. We all resisted.
Right.
Everybody resists any change.
Of course.
But then it's thanks to the ISM, and more so, I would say, for oil tankers, thanks to the vetting inspections, that you have an uninterrupted and required supply of stores and spare room.
Right. Right.
Otherwise, these things were depended more upon how much money was left in the budget,
Right.
rather than what was the safety need of the vessel.
And that's a very interesting perspective. I mean, the what probably SIRE did is that they transferred the responsibility of a ship run or operated safely into the owners in a very on the ground kind of approach, where they said that safety is not a good to have and it's a must right now because it's going to cost you. And unless something costs us, like for example, we are driving an Euro 4 car, not because we are suddenly very environmental conscious, but because the government will not issue our licenses. I mean, we cannot drive, there's no other option. Unless something comes as by force, I believe in all sectors, people are very resistant to paying their own money to, whether it's to make the ship safer or in other ways. I mean, what I have seen, like this is it's a different but a very interesting analogy which I see, that the countries which have the highest cost of cigarettes are the only countries where people are not smoking. Because no matter how many ads you run that cigarettes go to cause you this and that, it's not as effective as raising the cost of cigarettes, because then it'll pinch them. So same thing probably happened with the owners, that SIRE said that now it will pinch you commercially if the ship is not safe. And that's when probably SIRE, I'll hand it over to you. I mean, you have seen the advent of SIRE, how it started and all that. So,
yeah, so today you're probably driving a Euro 6 car, not a Euro 4.
Sorry, yes. I was,
a Bharat 6 car,
right.
If you're driving in India. And yes, the emissions have become an issue. Now, we do criticize technology many times, and whatever effect that it's having on us as people. But at the same time, if you look at how technology has made engines much more efficient.
Absolutely.
Today, if you're driving a mini or a small compact car, your emissions or rather your fuel consumption is what it would be for a motorbike 30 years ago.
Right.
So today my car has probably just a little more consumption than my motorcycle back in the 80s.
Back in the 80s. That goes a long way to,
Yes. So now we are becoming
more conscious.
Yeah. At the same time, technology is also driving better engines, better fuel economy for the cars.
Right.
For not only for cars, for ships, for all modes of transport.
Right.
You've got more efficient engines, more reliable engines.
Right.
Now, how we use technology is what is going to define whether it's useful or
not. Yes.
I'm sure back in the 40s and 50s, when nuclear energy was
just about discovered,
there were people who did a lot of thinking on how the fission reaction is going to be used, whether it's going to be used to bomb another country or another people, or it's going to be used
to enable
for having energy.
Yes.
It's the energy needs of the world were going up.
Right. That's absolutely true. And so what did you see with because you were exclusively, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you were throughout your career mostly always associated with tankers. Am I correct there?
That's right.
Right. So having, with that kind of responsibility, especially as a DPA and the CSO and the HSEQ, you've been so close to vetting inspections, SIRE inspections, and what was happening before and after the first SIRE when the VIQ1 was introduced? I think, which year was it?
I think I don't remember the year when it was introduced. I do remember when I myself underwent.
It was, I think, 2006, if I'm not mistaken, probably.
No, it was
or
long
it was, yes. It was long before that.
1993.
Oh.
In 1993, I underwent the first vetting inspection. As a matter of fact, the SIRE inspection started a little before the ISM Code came.
Right.
So how I'm relating to today is I was a chief mate when I underwent the first
SIRE inspection.
And I was already a master when I underwent the first
ISM inspection. Okay.
So it certainly SIRE predates ISM.
Right.
But ISM code was for all vessels, and SIRE inspections even till date
is for tankers.
Are limited to tankers and more prevalent on oil tankers. And then, yes, SIRE made a lot of changes. SIRE made a lot of changes. Made the ship staff aware of many things, and people sure aware of so many things.
Right.
Well, if you got a deficiency for not having a certain procedure or not having a certain equipment on
Yeah.
board,
Yeah.
it was noted down, and he wanted to close it so
Sure.
that the ship could do business.
Yes. Right.
And then, in a hurry, you got the equipment and the procedure,
Right. Right.
the right procedure to do it.
Right.
Like I mentioned, that you didn't have all things available on the ship. You did not have all equipment available on the ship before that. But now, there was a list of publications to be carried in.
Okay.
You had to have those publications on board. If you didn't have, it went out as an observation
Right.
in a wedding inspection, or in a, I should say, a SIRE inspection.
Sign inspection. Okay.
And that's why the ship staff was forced to look into these things,
Right.
and the owners, managers, operators were forced to make sure
That they have
the
those
availability
equipments all.
of
Right.
all those.
Right. So, I mean, when I'm just curious to know that when the SIRE started, what was the average number of observations that the ships were getting?
Well, there is a data available on it,
Right.
which I don't have it offhand. What I can say is
Yeah,
about 8 to 10, 12.
8 to 10, 12. Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah.
Well, like 8 to 12 observations was
Normal.
the norm at that time,
Right.
in the late 90s. Down to about under 5.
Okay. Those are the rare cases that under 5 and stuff like that.
Yeah, those days was
It was rare,
but
yes.
now it's the industry average.
Yes.
I think last I checked data, the industry average was 3.9.
3 point something, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
3.7 observations. Why the SIRE regime is getting, but then again, I won't say just this data is the only indicator
Right.
that the safety has improved.
No, of course not. Yeah. I mean, I think there was a lot less uniformity at that point of time, right? I mean, even probably the inspectors were a little confused on whether it wasn't that the case. I mean, at least in the initial few years till it settled down. Did you see that confusion within? Yeah.
It did. It took a while. There was less standardization of inspections at that time. A lot depended upon the SIRE inspector. And as a matter of fact, the companies, they had a database on SIRE inspectors.
So the blacklisted and the whitelisted.
Absolutely. That this SIRE inspector looks into this area
Yeah.
more closely than the other one. Okay, and if this inspector gives you 8 observations, you're okay.
Right.
But with another inspector, if you get more than 5, it's not okay.
Okay. Right.
Right? So there was, I worked on the other side.
Yeah.
I worked in an office.
Of course.
So I would send a list of all the observations that particular inspector had made. And I would send it to the ship to have a look at it by preparing for an inspection.
Yes. Right.
And then there were some inspectors who concentrated a lot more on navigation. There were some inspectors who concentrated a lot more on how your maintenance was.
Right.
The others who focused much more on procedures. So it again, these inspections are also subjective. You can never take the
Sure.
subjectivity completely out. I don't know how SIRE 2.0 is going to progress. We'll know after a couple of years.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, we have been working on SIRE 2.0 for quite a while now. And the reason I was asking you the question of confusion is that I don't know if this will happen this way, but we do see a lot of confusion among inspectors, among seafarers on whether a certain interpretation of a line, of a requirement is this way or that way. You know, they can be interpreted in different ways. Like, for example, if if a second mate is supposed to, let's say, or a third mate is maintaining the LSAFFA, and he's supposed to maintain the lifeboat, which means that he should know about the lifeboat. Now, how deep do you grill him, or how deep do you dig to get his understanding? Are you expecting that he's going to have as much of an understanding as a senior safety superintendent or something like that? Because there is a point where the third mate would then falter, and it might be interpreted as lack of knowledge. But that same person, that same third mate, could come across as one of the best, third mates with another inspector. So this is where, I mean, especially when SIRE 2.0 has brought in the human element, I don't know what, I mean, I would love to ask your take on that. That human element, do you feel that it can be having different interpretations in different minds and different parts of the world as such?
Like I said before, subjectivity cannot completely be taken out of these processes.
Sure.
There will be some subjectivity. There will be some inspectors who would concentrate more on certain aspects, on the human element, etc. But as far as the SIRE industry goes, or I shouldn't call it SIRE industry, maybe as far as the SIRE inspections go, they have now a very matured forum.
Okay.
They have these annual 6-monthly
Right.
seminars where exactly these subjects are discussed. That, what is how much depth are you going to go into it? You can't be doing competency examinations of the ship.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Just because he has a license, and he has a license from a recognized flag state,
Yeah.
certain basics have to be accepted.
Got it.
Then, recently I went to Baj to do a pre-SIRE
Right.
for one honor,
Right.
pre-SIRE inspection. And all the officers on the ship, all of the crew and officers on the ship were Vietnamese.
Okay.
Now, there can be a bit of a communication problem,
Of course.
but I did not see any problem where competency was addressed.
Okay.
So
Everybody was Vietnamese on this ship, top to bottom.
everybody was Vietnamese.
Okay. Right.
She was a product chemical tanker,
Okay.
Chem-Pro product
Okay.
tanker,
Right.
Chem-Oil as they call it.
Okay.
She was carrying oil. The understanding of all the systems was very good.
Mm-hmm.
They took a while to explain what they meant.
Right.
And I think the inspectors are tuned to working with different nationalities, different ways of expressing what they're saying,
Right.
and they understand the cultural sensibilities.
Right.
And I don't think this is going to have too much of an effect in the long run. This subjectivity is
Okay.
not
Not going to impact that.
I have huge faith in the OCIMF and
Right.
the direction that it has taken, plus the kind of forums they have, and what comes out and
Absolutely.
what learnings they get out of each forum. At the same time, I would say the transparency of the system.
Right.
You know from the ship, let's go to SIRE 1.0 or the
Yeah.
SIRE 2.0, we will see how it actually.
Sure.
So in SIRE 1.0, you had a list of questions.
Yeah.
You had reference to the requirements. They were extracts from SOLAS,
So there's Smart Pole and yes,
everything.
LSA code and everything. Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
So there wasn't too much of a scope of misinterpreting.
Right. Okay.
Okay? And if you, as a seafarer, were familiar with it, you could stand your ground
Yeah.
with the inspector
Right.
and say that I'm doing the right thing, if you were doing the right thing.
Yes. Yes. And that is actually one of the things that I find. I mean, a lot of resistance in people challenging the inspector, and challenging in a positive way. I'm not saying challenging to be arrogant with him or her, but that is something I find lacking, not just in the seafarers, also in the companies, because sometimes it so happens that an inspection observation is blatantly wrong, and challenging it by the ship staff was not done, or it was improperly done, or the inspector anyways put down the observation, which can be defended in many different ways, but the companies are sometimes reluctant to, go back to the OCIMF or go back to the oil major. Have you seen this? I mean, yeah.
So here I would like to, talk a little bit about the process.
Sure.
The entire process of inspection. Inspectors are people like you and me who have their license and who have been mariners, and they got themselves, they went through a process and they became inspectors. Now, they go on a ship, they note down their observations. A lot of times we call them vetting inspectors. They are not vetting inspectors.
Right.
They are SIRE inspectors.
Right.
So they have done an inspection as per a format. And that format goes to the vetting department of the oil major.
Sure.
Now, that oil major, the vetting department will look at it,
Right.
and he sift out if there are any frivolous
Sure.
observations.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Now, and then he will send a list to the company that these are the observations that we have found, and please comment on it.
Right. Right.
And then you have two opportunities to comment upon it. One opportunity is within the 14 days you have to comment upon it.
Sure.
So you put in your comments, the company puts in their comments, and they can say, and they do say, that this observation is it's not correct, and it was like this, and they provide evidence.
Right.
Then there are other observations on which they're working.
Right.
So they would go back and say that we are working on it, and we will give a subsequent comment,
Right. Right.
and then they're allowed to give a subsequent comment.
Right.
And then the process is entirely transparent. Now the company's comments, what are called the operator's comments.
Sure. Yeah.
The operator's comments also go to the vetter. Then he looks at it again, and then different oil majors have different policies.
Okay.
But one policy that I think the few oil majors that I have met, and I've been to their offices to discuss with them the vetting process, etc.
Yeah.
They have one thing in common, that one vetter
Yeah.
can accept the ship, but if the ship has to be rejected,
Okay.
it goes to a second.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Now, between the two vetters, if there is if both agree that the ship should be rejected, it will be rejected.
Okay.
If one feels that the ship should be, and if the second vetter feels that the ship should be
Accepted. Yeah.
accepted,
Yes.
then it goes to their line manager
Oh. Okay.
or to the vetting manager.
And
then he looks at
he
the
does.
comments of both the inspectors.
Okay.
He looks at the owner's comments.
Okay.
He looks at the inspector's observations, and then a call is taken.
So the inspection actually happened only once. When you said sending to a second vetter, that is within the office, another person of the vetting team is going to decide. That's what you're saying. But the ship was inspected only once, right?
Ship is inspected
Only once,
only
yeah.
once. Ship
All right.
is inspected once.
Yeah.
This inspection report, how it is interpreted
Right.
in the oil major's office, those procedures are different
Are
for
different
different
for
oil
different,
majors.
okay,
But
okay.
mostly, a ship is never rejected on the basis of one wetter's
Comments or
Opinion.
opinion. Yeah.
or his interpretation.
Right.
It's going to a second one. So it's a highly transparent kind of a
Got it. Okay.
process.
Got it.
And I'm not saying that everything is kosher and everything is going to be foolproof
Sure.
and every inspection result is going to be fair,
Sure.
but most are.
Right.
And that's why, a lot of times the companies, because they have an opportunity to answer these comments, answer the observations, they don't mind or they don't always ask their ship staff to kind of insist.
Okay.
You don't want to annoy the inspector, do you?
Of course. No, there are certain instances which I have seen. I mean, as a master, that when you see the report, it doesn't paint the picture of the observation. I mean, the observation which has come on paper is not really painting the picture of what has happened on board. Because, for example, a very simple example would be, you've got, let's say, 50 stay wires on various parts of the ship, mast stay wires I'm talking about. Now an inspector goes around and he finds one small part of one stay wire undergreased or not properly maintained, as opposed to every other stay wires being in a very, very neat and proper condition. Now, he could definitely give that as an observation for sure, but there needs to be some context to it, right? I mean, it's not a practice that the ship is following, that the stay wires are not greased, but it's sort of a. Do you think that there should be a differentiation between these two, or like if the comment says, if the observation says that the stay wire was not greased, it goes on to show that the ship doesn't have a culture of greasing the stay wires, which is untrue, which is definitely not true, because all the others were greased. This is another. I'll give you another simple example. That let's say there is a comment saying that the HRU has expired and it was not replaced, but there is a follow-up correspondence with the makers that you guys don't touch the HRU. We are going to come and inspect your vessel in 2 months, and we will make sure, even though it is expired, we will be the one to touch the HRU. I'm just taking an example of the VDR HRU, or an HRU which cannot be replaced by, I mean, it can be, but the manufacturer in this case, let's say, has already put down a comment that you should not change it. Now, without that comment, only saying that the HRU has expired kind of paints a different picture, don't you think? I mean, is it necessary to be highlighted, these kind of observations, or because it somehow then paints a picture that the ship staff or the company was not taking care of it, whereas it was very clearly, there are follow-up messages and correspondence regarding that. This happened on one of our ships. I don't want to name the company, but it happened on one of the ships I was on as a second mate. And that's why I remember that it sort of stuck with me because of this reason, that the entire picture did not come across from the observation. And then nobody in the vetting office can do anything about it, because they do not have that correspondence as well. They are just taking the observation and deciding on that. So,
so I go back to the process again.
Okay.
Now, it's very unlikely. But since you're saying it happened with you, I'll take your word for it. And probably the inspector got up from the wrong side of the bed that day. Because if there are 50 stay wires and one of them is not greased, and he makes an observation on it, it's quite harsh, I would say. But if, like, I was sitting in the company office and the master calls me up and he says that he's giving me an observation like this, what do? I will tell him, take it.
Right.
The reason I know what I would tell him to take it is because you don't want to, why would you want to antagonize the inspector? First of all.
Right.
Second, this observation, the inspector is not making a decision upon the acceptability of the vessel.
Sure. Sure.
It's going to go to the oil major, and in their office, they will see it. Now you're saying that they don't get the context to it. They do.
Okay.
When I will put my comments, I will mention in the comments that there are 48 or 52 or whatever number of stays on the board.
Yeah.
All of them were properly greased. Just this one wasn't. And then now we have added it to our TMS. I'm adding pictures of all the wires which were, and I give them a picture of the 4 wires at least. And wherever there are stays, there will be 4 stays. Then all of the 3 were greased.
Right.
The rest of it I could have done later.
Right.
You know, but that picture with the date of that date, and I can upload that picture.
Sure. Sure.
So the person who's making a decision about the acceptability of the vessel
Has the proper context now.
he has the proper context. And
Got it.
next thing is that this I was sailing and I felt this. When I was in office, again I felt this.
Okay.
When the captain would call me up and say that, oh, I got 11 observations, but you know, this inspector was not so good and this and that.
Yeah.
And I would just laugh it off because people are taking it personally.
Yeah.
The comment is not on the master. The comment is not on the chief engineer. The comment is on the ship.
Right. Right.
And it doesn't just say something about the ship. It also says about the inspector. Now what happens is, one inspector is doing practically about 8 inspections, 10 inspections a month.
Per month, yes, of course.
The oil major is receiving inspection reports from this inspector at that rate.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the oil majors are also looking whether this inspector gives frivolous reports.
Sure.
Does he make frivolous observations?
There's a trend marking and sort of data mining on that side also, as well.
Even if they don't do data mining, because that would probably be against the political correctness.
Right, right.
You know, but even if they're not doing data mining, they have it in the back of their mind.
Sure, sure.
Like, I won't name, but there used to be one inspector on the Indian coast.
Okay.
He was very famous for, you know, making very personal observations about the ship. And I once went to BP office, and I was telling them that, you know, I was talking to them about our records, and they pulled out our company's record, and they looked at it. And I says, "Oh, you got mostly a very good SIRE report. Oh, this one, and this one, you got a very high number of observations, and let me look at them. Oh no, they are from Captain so and so. It's okay, we understand it.
Right.
So
got it.
The level, the water finds level.
Sure.
So finally, the process is so transparent that you are not going to be unfairly, the ship is not going to get unfairly
Treated, penalized. Right.
So this is, I've seen it from 2 sides.
Right, of course.
One being on the ship, and the other being ashore and uploading the comments on the OCIMF website.
Right.
And then I also had some insight into this process by meeting the oil majors and looking at how they use this data that is captured by the inspector on the ship.
Right.
And more or less, it's a fair process.
Okay. That's great. That's a
Yeah, even the
fantastic
Supreme Court gives some incorrect judgment.
Of course,
So
of course.
we can live with some
Right.
unfair
Of course.
inspection.
It's never
And
going to be
within 30
perfect
days,
world. Yeah.
within 30 days, you can have another inspection.
Sure.
If you had, let's say, the short end of the stick in one inspection,
You can reach
after
the
30 days, you initiate another inspection.
Oh,
You have a second opportunity. You have second, third, many opportunities.
okay, sure.
But if there's a series of bad reports on a ship, probably something is wrong with the ship.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. So transitioning from SIRE to since your role was also the HSEQ department and safety. If we keep SIRE inspections aside, I mean, did you see there was any conflict ever between safety and the commercial interests of the vessel in terms of how the owner or the manager sees it, or how is it dealt with?
So now, this is one of the things that I would say one of the side effects of ISM Code. That there was a requirement to have a DPA.
Right.
And then you started having, but a lot of times the DPAs were the technical managers.
Okay.
The person who is actually putting pressure on the ship is the DPA, is nominated as the DPA.
Right. Right.
As ISM code and the system matured, most companies went in for an independent safety department.
Okay.
And the more independence that the safety department had, the more they were able to internally regulate their own processes so that they were more safety oriented.
I see. All right.
So that's how it kept maturing. So the independence of the safety department plays a big role. And second thing that plays a big role in it, so that there's no commercial and technical and a conflict with the safety, is the top management.
The attitude of the top management, how they want to run their ships. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
The first chapter in tanker management and self-assessment,
Yeah.
TMSA,
Yeah.
be it 1, 2, or 3. Now I think TMSA 3 is on. The first chapter is on management, leadership, and accountability.
Right.
And I have seen it myself. That if the top management is committed
Right.
to safety, to safer ships, then everything else falls in place. The conflicts get totally rooted out. I want to give you an example. I was working for this company where I was informed that hot work had taken place on board
Okay. Okay.
without communication with the safety department.
Right.
Now this was the requirement as per our processes
This was a tanker.
on an oil tanker.
Oh.
So this was a bit of a challenging situation for me. How do I communicate with the ship staff
Right.
that no hot work can take place while this hot work has taken place on the ship in the presence and under the supervision of a technical superintendent?
Whoa. I see. I see. Okay.
So my next question was to the technical superintendent, whom I sent an email saying that I understand that hot work was carried out without the information of the safety department, and you were in supervision. How did it happen? So he comes back with an answer that he informed the technical manager.
And this is happening on email.
On email.
Okay. Okay.
Most of my communication is only on email.
Of course. Yeah.
Or it is recorded like it's being recorded
Yeah.
now.
Right.
So I asked him. So he says, I informed the technical manager.
Right.
So my next email was to the technical manager. That how did this hot work take place? And he did not answer my mail. He felt it was below his dignity
Okay.
as the head of technical to reply to a mail like that. So I sent out another mail. After a few days, waiting for good 3-4 days, I sent out another mail. And this time I copied it to the CEO.
Right. Right.
So the CEO immediately called him up. How did this happen? And how come you have not answered the mail?
The first mail, yes.
You have to file in your reply right away. This is not acceptable.
Right.
Now, with the stand of the top management,
Right.
it was very clear. It became very clear to everyone across news travels.
Sure.
It became very clear to everyone in the company that this kind of business would not be tolerated.
Right. It's not going to be taken lightly, and
As a matter of fact, action was taken against both the technical manager and the technical supervisor.
I see.
In another case, in another company where I was in work, I know of somebody who did not report, master did not report when a pump man came out of the tank and collapsed in deck.
I see. Okay.
And he collapsed in deck. And then he called the master called on the phone to the operations superintendent in the office. And the operations superintendent said, if he's fine now, forget it.
Okay.
And somehow this matter reached the DPA.
Right.
And DPA raised it to the managing director.
Right.
And managing director took a very tough stance
On this.
and he removed both the master and the operations superintendent. And by the way, both of them were well liked in the company. They were both very progressive, very good go-getters,
Right.
achievers.
Right.
But the company decided to sacrifice them. Not sacrifice them.
Yeah.
To live without their services.
Live without their services, yes.
Rather than have a culture in the company
Where this is accepted.
Where this is accepted. All these
Got
things
it.
happened long ago.
Got
when it was still firming up, ISM. etc.
Right,
was still
right.
firming up.
So these are
These
some of
things
the
are very few and far between nowadays.
Right, of course, and this was a time where people were sort of the old timers were taking things lightly and were still sort of thinking that they could get by with this.
So this was time
Okay.
of transition. The transition has taken place. Now I think most operators, they know. And then we talk about WhatsApps, attention spans.
Yes.
Today, anybody's doing something on the ship, you don't know. A crew member could be recording it.
Right.
He could be recording it, and he would probably have it on YouTube tomorrow.
Sure. Yes.
So nobody.
Could take a chance over there. Yeah.
There is more transparency.
Yes.
There is more accountability.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were mentioning about establishing a safety culture, or how good or bad is the safety culture in the country. I think a great measure of that is how well a management review is conducted in the country.
I see. Okay.
It's a TMSA requirement that there should be a quarterly
Management review of the yes, of course.
in the company.
Right.
More and more SIRE inspectors are asking the ship staff that were you sent minutes of the quarterly management review. The ship is doing a management review,
Sure.
which is forming an input for the management review.
Overall
in the
management
office.
review. Yeah.
And then there is an output from that management review, and then there are actionable points.
Right.
Is it coming back on board or not? And is it being tracked? Those actionable points, are they being tracked or not?
Right.
more and more transparency on this issue is prevalent now in the industry.
Right. Right.
And how good is the safety culture of a company will be known by how well the management review is conducted.
Right.
How involved is the CEO or the top management of the company in this management review process?
Right. 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 So, I mean, one aspect of this, what you just said, could be that a person is consciously ignorant of safety. I mean, as you said, the safety culture stems a lot from the top management. So that if the top management is consciously ignorant, that is probably not happening anywhere in the world, because that's sort of not even an option anymore. But would you say there are instances and cases where the company sees that the cost of safety is so high that the company at that point of time is not, I mean, probably doesn't have the luxury to be spending that much? One example of that, and we have heard about this story quite a bit, that ship comes out after a 4-day STS operation and the captain says that I'm dropping anchor and I'm going to sleep for the next 24 hours. I'm going to let everybody take rest. And because in one of the companies I was sailing with, there was sort of a rule that if you're having back-to-back STS operations, you must take a gap in between, even if it costs commercial losses to the company. If there is a berthing restriction and you can only berth in this time and that time, even then the company was allowing us to take that kind of. But I would say that for smaller companies who are not making as much money, would they also, I mean, do you see that they could be trapped in a position where they have to take a call on either this or that? Have you seen something like this? Or, yeah.
A 6 hours, 24 hours break.
No, I think there was, yes,
I think
18,
8 hours
8,
would be
12
fair.
probably, yes.
8 hours would be fair. And the smaller companies and the larger companies, if they have independent safety departments and the safety departments are aware of their obligations, responsibilities and accountability, they will have the answer.
Okay.
It has happened quite a few times in the past where the ships have taken a break. And I don't see it as an expense. It's not an expense.
Right.
Why? Because, you see, to understand the commercial aspect of it, again, you can very well apply safety without making too much of a compromise in commercial requirements.
Right.
Okay? You can't just throw the company out of business for safety. Right?
Right.
Like 24 hours, I think I would say no.
Yes.
24 hours, I would tell the captain, sorry, no, you can't take 24 hours.
Right. Right.
But 8 hours looks very, very
Acceptable.
reasonable to me.
Reasonable. Right.
And having said that, you see, if you look at it, how would it affect you commercially? There is always a window available, okay,
Right.
to take that. It's how you manage that window.
Okay.
Right? Now, another ship is ready to start doing this and you take 6 hours off. Any reasonable charterer
Yeah.
would not put you off hire for 6 hours.
Sure.
Any reasonable charterer would not put you off hire for those 6 or 8 hours.
Right.
Right? The negotiation can be on 6 hours or 8 hours.
Right. Of course.
But he's not going to put you off hire.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's say the vessel is not on charter, on time charter, and you are doing voyage charter. You would calculate what's your next voyage, whether you can make it to the next voyage or not, whether you can take a break or not. It's a value judgment.
Okay.
It's a value judgment. But if the people on board are tired, they are tired. If they haven't had a break, they haven't had a break. They need a break.
Sure. Whatever the reason is.
Whatever the reason is.
Sure.
if the vessel is engaged in STS operations.
Yeah.
Today, if you're going for a tanker management and self-assessment audit by the oil major,
Right.
they would want to see it in your procedures that if the ship is engaged in frequent voyages, cross harbor trades. Probably in Singapore, you do a lot of cross harbor.
Yes, of course. Feeder vessels.
You do a lot of STS in Galveston lightweight area.
Sure, yeah.
To have an extra officer, to have extra crew on.
Right.
Then again, at that point of time, you'll have to take a call. You can put maintenance on the back burner for a while and just keep operations.
Right.
So, probably a good understanding of the situation by the master and chief engineer, apart from the technical superintendent,
Right.
can bring about very amicable solutions.
I completely agree with you on that because the thing is that I feel that there's a lot of misunderstanding in this respect. When even I've seen some of my colleagues at sea complain about the fact that they're not getting enough rest, and which is very often a fact, but also sometimes it stems from lack of preparation, lack of a little thought behind how you plan out things, and you put everybody on deck and then suddenly nobody is rested. But there are situations you need to put everybody on deck. I'm not saying that, but sometimes it's just also a lack of planning on the ship staff's part, which can save, which could have saved a lot of friction, or it could have got people rested. That's something. Yeah.
I always have this question when I go and visit a ship. Why do you need a cadet to run photocopies? Why can't we run photocopies ourselves? Why can't the captains and chief mates run their own photocopies and let the cadet take the rest?
Right.
And then he can be there for the final gauging, etc. And then he should be there to fresh after that. A lot of times you see an inspection is going on and the cadet is standby.
Standby, yes. The concept of keeping standbys. Yeah, right. So true.
So it just needs to be planned. If let's say something is being overhauled in the engine room, not everybody needs to be there. If a fourth engineer is overhauling a purifier, he knows how to do it.
Sure.
He has a fitter to help him.
Sure.
Now, why should second engineer and chief engineer be involved with it? These are some tough questions that.
Sure, and it's very subjective. Yeah, it's very subjective. It should not sound like it's only the responsibility of very often it's sort of a combination of both. I mean, it's good planning, and if good planning cannot solve the matter, then of course we need to take care of the fatigue of the people, and that has to be addressed. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that most of the companies are now cognizant of that.
Right.
That rest hours are required.
Right.
And people do need to take rest. And again, people of my generation and people of generation between yours and mine, they all thought that it was tough to continuously go on working for 24 hours.
Right.
But we don't realize that our reflexes slow down with the fatigue.
Yes.
And sometimes you end up making mistakes, which can be very expensive.
Yes.
And again, if safety is looked at it like, it's a cliche when they say that if you think safety is expensive, try an accident.
Yeah, it's a cliche, but it's true. I mean, it's still true. And accidents in our case, in our profession, is not like falling down or something like that. It's going to be we might come in the first page of every newspaper in the world if something like that happens. I mean, it's very expensive. It's way more expensive than we can imagine.
And I think that some of us who are sailing, we take our jobs very lightly.
Okay.
Because it comes naturally to us, so we don't think of it as a very, very important job. But
Right.
actually, it's an extremely important job that we're doing.
Sure.
When I was teaching, and I would sometimes come across this question, some boys would say, and they would complain that there's too much of paperwork, too many checklists.
Yeah.
So I had just one counter to them. I said, look, you finished your contract, you're flying back on a plane, the pilot feels the same. He
Too
thinks
many
there are
checklists.
too many checklists. I don't need to do the checklist. Why do I need to do the checklist?
Sure.
I'll fly anyway. I've been doing it for years. Are you comfortable with that? Most of the people will say they are not comfortable with it.
Right.
So if you are not comfortable with it,
Right.
with somebody else not following a checklist, then you don't want to follow the checklist. That's hypocrisy.
Okay. Very true. Very true. But I mean, this is a great advice, because this sort of answers the question for a lot of people who have taken their job so much for granted that, okay, as you said, I've been doing this so many times. I mean, what's the new thing about that? I mean, and we hear this so often, especially at sea, that these new checklists are trying to teach us our jobs, and I think it's a little less in the present generation. It's probably coming down a little bit, but from the generation before us, or even our generation, we have heard this a lot, that we've been doing this in a certain way, and this is how it is supposed to be done, and now with this quote unquote new regulation, we have to do it another way. What's the big deal in the problem? What was the problem in doing it like that for so many years? So, and that's a great counter what you just said, that what if the pilot doesn't feel that it feels the same way? He's done it for so many years.
Yeah, he also feels there's no need for a checklist.
Right.
Yeah. Now, people complaining about a lot of regulations coming in. Well, I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on whether the regulations are too many or too few. There's also a school of thought that it's not properly regulated, the industry.
Right.
And if you look at any other profession, a doctor today,
Right.
they have a lot of regulations. They are keeping up with their new technologies are coming out all the time.
Right.
And they have to keep up with everything. A lawyer, if you see, he's quoting from, there was a Supreme Court judgment in 1964 in such a similar case, and this was happening and that was happening. An engineer is trying to learn new things every day. What's wrong? We are also professionals.
Sure.
We need to keep updating.
Updated up.
And if the regulations are too many, it's because it's needed. And we cannot do anything to change it. We cannot go turn back that clock.
Sure.
That reminds me of when I first came to Calcutta in 2006.
Yeah.
And after work, I would be going back on the EM bypass, and there would be just about 10 cars in view.
Right.
Today there are 300 cars at all.
400 cars, yes.
300, 400 cars in view any time that you're driving over there. So I can't wish the traffic. All I can do is I can be a better
Driver,
more cautious
pressure.
driver.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do at sea. The regulations are not going away.
Right.
Probably more and more are going to come.
Right.
We got to up our game.
Right.
We got to raise our game and stay abreast with them.
Sure.
And at the same time, we have now short bursts of work. Like, first time when I went out to sea, I went out for 16 months. I didn't come home for 16 months.
Sure.
Today, 4 months is already enough.
Of course.
So, you go at sea for 4 months, you come back, recharge yourself,
Right.
and then you go back.
Go back.
If you're finding it too much,
Right.
take a longer leave.
Sure.
But we will have to accommodate the prevailing industry conditions.
Yes. Yes.
Industry is not going to change because of us.
Right. Right.
And if we keep complaining, then we'll just become bitter.
Yes.
We'll just
Absolutely.
deter people,
Yes.
and it will not help us, and it will not help anyone.
And another perspective from the side of a seafarer, I can tell you, because I mean, not to sound sort of preachy in any way, but what I have seen, I mean, what I felt as a master, I was master for about 8 years, and during the first 1 or 2 years of your being a master, you don't realize this as much as you eventually realize it, that all the things, many of the things we keep complaining about, as in work pressure, too many checklists, too many regulations, it's very often a management problem. When I say that, what I mean is, if the sense of ownership of keeping the ship to a certain standards goes back to the officers and the crew, and that's a leadership issue. That's where the master, the chief engineer, plays the leadership role to invoke the culture that you're not doing it, like you're not wearing a safety belt in the car because the police has asked you to. It's not the safety of the police you're taking care of. It's because if you hit a roadblock, you will be saved, and that sense should automatically bring your hand towards the safety belt when you sit in the car. Not because, oh, do I have a regulation, do I have a checklist, or do I have a police standing behind me to watch it? That should not be the real motivation. The real motivation should be the reason, and that reason can be explained, like in a lot of cases, why a certain regulation is that way, or why a checklist is asking you to do it in a certain way, can be explained in a very basic level, which many people do not do. And that's what I'm talking about. It's more a leadership issue on the ship. And if the leadership is straight, if the leadership is good, then that culture will be inculcated in the people. And I've seen this happen very often, that the people take ownership of that. Then they don't feel that they're doing it because the captain told them to, or because a regulation told them to, or because there's a checklist. They sort of feel the need to do it anyways. Because, I mean, I've had some fantastic, fitters and pumpmen who are so particular about the hot work permit that they will not agree to work unless it is diligently filled up, unless it is absolutely, because they understand it's beyond the checklist. It's their lives at stake. And it's the lives of others that we are putting in those spaces at stake. It's not a burden as in a more paperwork or something. That's what I felt as, yeah.
Absolutely, and the people in the office who are writing out the procedures, they do have a responsibility that they take every stakeholder on board when they're preparing the procedures. How about writing out a procedure and sending it out to, say, 3, 4, 5 bright masters in the company and get their feedback on it?
Right.
And if there is a feedback, valuable feedback, include it.
So
then you are co-opting the ship's senior management into that procedure. So that's required too. And that again is leadership. How the shore office is taking leadership in this, and then the ship staff, the ship senior management becomes a part of the whole
process. The process, yes. So true. I mean, eventually every industry should transition for the better. That is, there is no question about it. Whether this is, that's what is probably happening when there are regulations coming, even though initially they might seem as a burden or as a compulsion. But then I also see a lot of double standards in this, because if you think about it, we've all accepted that you need at least 25 people to run a ship, right? I mean, regardless of the size, at least 23 to 25 people. But the safe manning certificate only gives you 14. So companies can get by saying that, okay, your safe manning is 14, I've given you 18, what else do you need? And I'm not saying this is a lot of companies, because they have to also comply with rest hours and other things, but probably also this should come across as some kind of a regulatory requirement to have and probably the safe manning certificate, I don't know if it is possible on the logistical level, but if it could take into account that it would change with time, with the routes, with the trade of the ship, instead of having a cookie cutter approach that, okay, this is the safe manning for this type of ship, or so that's what
This is already happening in the sense that today people are talking about operational manning,
right,
rather than safe manning certificate. Now, if you're driving a car, the requirement in India is that you have to have 2 airbags.
right,
But that doesn't stop the car manufacturer from having 6 airbags in the car.
sure.
And
Does every car have an airbag?
yes, now 2 airbags is, I think,
Okay.
I'm not too sure about
Okay.
it.
Okay. Well,
But I think you have to have
yeah.
an airbag,
Okay.
and this was resisted by the industry,
Okay.
by the automobile industry, but finally they do have it.
They do. Right.
So nothing is stopping us from going over and above the minimum standards.
Sure.
The safe manning certificate is giving you minimum manning.
Sure. Yeah.
That's the minimum manning. Now just imagine that, let's say you're a ship which is laid up for a while, and you're not expecting it to be trading for some time, but you want to keep your ISM certificate alive. You want to keep all your certification. You don't want to go on what they call cold ship.
Yeah.
So just keep the safe manning. Container ships today are operating for a lot of companies
Right.
with manning of 16, with 16 people on board. That's it. More and more companies are doing more and more maintenance during the dry docking period.
Right. Right.
So main engines are being overhauled in line with your dry docks and your intermediate service.
Okay. Yeah.
So you're transferring, instead of keeping extra manning on board all the time
Sure.
and making them do chipping and painting.
You're
not do the
transferring
maintenance?
that. Yes.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Simple optimization of
Absolutely.
resources.
Absolutely.
Yes.
A lot of us,
Right.
at least younger people today, they don't hire a cook. Even
Right.
if they're too busy,
Right.
they order Swiggy.
Right. It's cheaper sometimes. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
So
right.
this is
right.
this is the way to go.
Right.
I get asked a question a lot in where I'm teaching
Uh-huh.
in the academy. That what's the story about automated ships?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because I can see the body on the faces of people.
And
What happens to their jobs?
what happens to us? Yes.
What happens to their jobs?
Sure.
Automated ships are there to stay. They will be coming.
Right.
If we have this discussion after 20 years,
Right.
I think it's a wild guess that 50% of the ships will be automated.
Automated. Right.
If you can have cars that can run on roads which are automated,
Yeah.
in the open sea, certainly ships can.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're
So
already
what I
getting
meant to say was
experimented on.
industry is changing. That's my only thing. And you cannot resist this change.
Sure. Yeah.
So you have to fit in with the industry. This is my suggestion to
Totally.
seafarers. You'll
Totally.
be happier people
Totally.
if you accept the changes in the industry
Right.
and move with it.
Right. Yeah, I guess, I mean, especially in today's generation, people sort of have accepted this, as you said, that it is they have to keep themselves updated and also follow all the increasing number of regulations which are coming. But one thing I wanted your opinion on is that how do you see the, because you have seen a lot of evolution in checklists, and right from probably when there were few checklists to today we have so many and so detailed. And so what do you think about their effectiveness and how they have evolved over time, or if you see any improvement is required yet? Or
yes, checklists and use of checklists and utility of checklists and effectiveness is a big issue.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, initially what happened is, once our inspector gave a recommendation.
That came as a point in a checklist for all.
Yeah. So a checklist came for it.
Right.
So people just kept generating checklists. However, is the checklist really useful? And what purpose is it serving? I think industry has reached a place, and many companies are doing it. And technology is being involved into it.
Right.
Wherein the checklists are iPad based, and you just take them and then you plug it into the computer, and the checklist is recorded that you've done it.
Right.
You're not generating too much paper.
Sure.
And if we from the ships take the management reviews seriously, and people in the office they take management reviews seriously, and then there is good communication and coordination between the ship and the shore, then these checklists can be reduced and made more effective.
Right.
The answer to a bad checklist is not to throw it away. The answer
just
is
to manage it well.
Make it better. They are not cast in stone.
Sure. Yeah.
They are not the gospel truth. They can always be modified.
Right.
And that's why you have revision numbers on the checklist.
Right.
Revise it. If it doesn't serve the purpose, revise it. And if you involve more and more, somehow once we reach the office from the ship, we do tend to get a little bit cut off from the soldier on the
from the soldiers on the front. Yeah.
So the more you involve people from the ships.
Sure. This is so interesting because I believe that there has been a lot of disconnect in the expectations, because we have recently been talking to several hundred companies. Over the last 6 months I have spoken to more than at least 250 companies in various ways that we are trying to add value to the industry as a company. But what I see is that a lot of decisions are taken by the management based on what they feel should happen, and it's passed on to the seafarers because then they feel that the seafarers should follow them, and if they're not following them, it's something lacking in the seafarers, and then they are pushed further to follow them. But I'm not saying that the feedback is not taken from the seafarer, but the feedback is not the decisive factor. Like if I was in the boardroom and I was deciding something, my decision would take precedence over 100 ships giving me another different kind of feedback, or maybe several ships, if not 100. But let's face it, most of the ships are also scared to give an open feedback. Sometimes not scared, but sometimes intimidated, and they feel that, okay, let's just agree, everything is satisfactory, everything, I'm just okay.
That's where the problem lies. As long as seafarers are not made the stakeholders,
sure,
and they are not the ones involved in the process of developing these checklists will be ignored.
Sure.
So that connect needs to be there.
So true.
Connect needs to be there, and I think most companies are realizing it.
Right.
I have seen so many companies who make sure that they route their senior officers through the office before they are promoted to the senior ranks.
Yeah, yeah.
So that they get to know what is happening in the office.
Right.
What are what role does the office play?
Right.
And at the same time, seminars are a very good forum where the officers can
voice their
seafarers can
opinions.
Voice their opinions
openly.
And then again, it depends upon the
management
how they encourage their seafarers to participate in those seminars.
Sure.
I was very fortunate. I worked for a couple of companies where these seminars were held in the right spirit, and they were, they were very useful not only for the seafarer but for the officer.
Right. That's yeah, and also it's very interesting how we have our layers of our filters before we put across an opinion. Let's say it could be, imagine a master asking an opinion of a messman on a certain situation in the galley. The messman, is that person really free to, he might be saying the right words, that okay, you can speak freely, no worries, just speak honestly, but is he really free? Is he really able to? So there are a lot of layers of barriers which I feel exists when between the shore and the ship also, that when somebody asks for an opinion, like a management review of the master would be a very typical example of how strong does a master put across a point which he feels is wrong with the management. Sometimes the master, there are a lot of barriers in that which I have seen, where I'm not saying it is imposed by the shore or the ship or by the person's individual. It might be a combination of different factors, but that's an interesting place, that do we really ever have a neutral opinion about something?
Probably, I would refer to ISM Code again over here, and let the masters look at their master's responsibility and authority. And that is why one of the first things that SIRE inspectors were asking back in early 2000s from the captain of the ship when they boarded for it.
Where is it written? Where is the master's authority? Right. Very common question, even now sometimes. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
So, does the master understand his authority?
Sure.
Now, a messman can get intimidated. I don't think a
master should
be getting intimidated at all.
Right. Now, but then to their defense, it comes to you with some kind of confidence in your job, confidence in the knowledge you have of your job, that yes, I should not be intimidated, I will take this decision. Now, very often young masters who have been freshly promoted, especially in a management company where the master has got a promotion after struggling for probably 12-15 years, maybe more for an ownership company sometimes, so it depends, but it's definitely not acceptable by any standards that a master takes a different call as opposed to what should be the safest path. But sometimes the master is not sure that what I'm thinking, is it really the safest? I'll give you as an example from when I was a young master, and I was about to enter the Mississippi River. Now there's an anchorage on the starboard side of the entrance of Mississippi River, and this is a very narrow river with when two ships are passing, there's hardly a few cables of distance between them, as you all already must know. So we had dense fog at the entrance, and I'm talking about fog which you cannot see beyond. It's like literally few meters of the visibility, and we were approaching, and ships were entering the Mississippi. The river was not closed, and ships were taking a call. The pilot was asking the master that, are you comfortable enough to enter? That was the question which the pilots of the VTS, the port authority, was asking. If the master said yes, they were going in. Otherwise, they could anchor. Now we knew for a fact that if if I take a call of not going in, we're going to miss this one full day of berthing, because the next berthing is only going to happen after 24 hours. Lake Charles, I mean, not Lake Charles, there's another, I think we were going to, I don't remember the port, but there are so many small ports in the Mississippi, but
Baton Rouge is one.
yeah, Baton Rouge, but I think we were not going there, but I don't honestly remember the port. But before going there, I sort of, very naively, I must say, I called up the office. I said that this is the situation. What do you think I should do? They said, it's your call, Captain. As they should. I mean, now I know it was not for them to take a call, but I had to inform them that this is the situation. But anyways, we interacted with a couple of vessels which were coming out, and we saw that the fog is going to extend till about 3 hours of passage, and for about 3 hours. Beyond that, it was relatively clear. But I did not enter. I dropped the anchor outside of Mississippi. I informed the company that I have taken this call, and I do not feel it is safe. Under that, we were very close to the maximum draft, and nobody really came back on it, or nobody questioned it. But what I'm saying is that I felt that point, that a very real feeling that I felt as a fresh junior master, that am I really taking, I mean, what is this going to, what could happen? I mean, I know it's going to be absolutely safe for the ship if I drop anchor. And since I don't have anybody else to advise me, the company has clearly told me that we are not going to advise you, it's your call. I have to take a call over here. So if I do enter and something happens, obviously it's going to be unacceptable by every standards. But if I drop anchor and the ship loses that one day of berthing, what else could happen? So I'm saying that very often in exercising that authority as a master in taking the safest path, there is always a trade-off that you have to sacrifice on some commercial aspects, and then you have to not, I mean, we have glorified stories of masters who have boldly diverted the ship towards India to sign off some people during COVID times and stuff like that, who have taken their own calls. But we also know of some situations where those calls were not the right, I mean, not probably they were keep playing it too safe or something like that. So as a fresh master, I'm saying that very often probably there is a dilemma in that respect, isn't it?
Well, there can be, but there's, you mentioned the word junior master. There's nothing like junior master.
Sure.
Master is already...
It's already the same, yes.
Master is already senior. By the time you become master, you're senior enough. And you are responsible, and you have to shoulder that responsibility, and that's what is your job. And I think there's nothing that I can comment upon on what you did, because in the end, it is your call. If I was working for the operator, if I was in the company, I would send it out as a safety alert to the full fleet, telling them such and such incident happened. And anybody else going to Mississippi River, please be careful. Okay? The idea is not to warn them about the Mississippi River. The idea is that here is a master who took a call.
Sure.
And we supported him.
Sure.
And that will send a great message to the fleet.
Right. So true.
That would send the right message to the fleet. And then, once you have a message like that going to the fleet, then it will give more encouragement to the masters to independently take a decision in such situations.
So true. Yeah, it depends so much on the management support of an individual. But I mean, this if like for example, if a safety department, do you feel that every safety department is able to take this call completely free of the burden of the commercial pressures, and is that actually already happening on the ground for even the smaller, the companies, or I'm not saying small or big company, I'm just pointing out the fact that some companies could live their lives with that flamboyancy that I will not compromise ever. But do you think some companies are, like especially the safety department of certain companies, could be under some kind of a pressure from the commercial department also, like in these kind of situations?
The safety departments, like I think we chatted about it before this recording, during the recording, that the safety department needs to be independent.
Sure. Yeah.
Needs to be independent. They should make these decisions independently. But that doesn't stop the safety department from conveying it, communicating it to the commercial department, why they're doing what they're doing. And in such a case, like you mentioned, the role of the safety department should just be to advise the master that you are a person on the spot, you take your call and we'll stand by. That's it.
Right.
It's a call not by the safety department, it's a call by the master.
Of course. But I do know of some companies, I don't want to name them, but like for example, there was this one instance, not on my ship, I've just heard about this from a close friend of mine, that the ship had a number of women, both as crew and as supernumeraries, and the ship was passing very close to the coast of Africa, close to Nigeria, not so much to Nigeria, but close to the very, I think within 25 miles of, somewhere in that range, really close. And there were attacks happening, there were piracy, there was civil wars going on in certain countries, and at that point of time it was a hot zone, that area was hot, and the master requested that we need to at least keep 100 miles distance from the coast. So, and the master was under clear pressure from both the safety and the operational department of the company that if you do this, it's your call, we can't stop you, but this is not going to come out well for you. And this was a very, very clear message which was passed on to him. I'm not saying this may be a one-off case, or he might have, I don't know the details of the situation, but this much I know happened, that he was almost intimidated to pass close just to save a couple of miles and save some ETA which was essentially a commercial need, but passing that close, no other ship was going that close. I mean, it may not have been a regulation or a rule that you can't go or something, but no, all the ships were keeping their 100 miles and 150 miles from the coast at that point of time. But this master had to come as close, including, I'm not even counting passing through fishing traffic and other things like that. But that's what I'm trying to get to, is that the role of the safety department should be
First of all, how did the company even get involved in the passage plan?
Yeah, because every day
the passage should have been planned by the master and the ship.
Yeah.
And he should have just gone ahead and followed the passage plan that he made.
No, but then the passage plan is always, at least in last few years, I've seen that the company has a clear say, and how are you passing, why are you taking this route, it's not all companies, I must say, but at least almost all companies that I've sailed with needed a copy of the passage plan, needed the distance, and if the distance was exceeding by a couple of 100 miles over let's say a 5,000, 6,000 mile passage, if it was exceeding by a couple of 100 mile or something, it had to be answered. And that answer, not always that it had a negative connotation, but it had to be explained why. And that is where the company got involved in how the master intends to pass, and that's what.
It's unfortunate if somebody questioned that a couple of 100 miles over a 6,000, 5,000 mile passage.
Yeah.
If you go by BP distance tables,
right,
and you plot your own courses, you will find that BP distance tables always give you a little bit extra distance.
Right, right.
Okay. Now, by the time somebody becomes a master, And that's why we should not be in a hurry to become a master.
Right.
By the time we should have that much of experience, we should have seen so many other masters take their calls, and thus we can take our call.
Right.
And here, a lot of times this happens that when you talk to the office, you think you're talking to the office. The office is not a single person.
It's not a single person. It's the culture.
The office is not a monolith.
Yes.
Now, when you ask the office and you tell them, no, this is what I'm going to do, and he says it's not going to be good for it, well, so be it. Sometimes you have to take these calls, not just in this profession, in every profession.
No, but then I must say that there's a commercial consideration even then. What I mean by that is the commercial consideration of the person on site, the master on site, like why that again boils down between a conflict between safety and commerce, even on a personal level. I know a master who has taken a loan of the next 20 years where he's got to pay 4 lakhs per month. This master needs to sail for at least 10 months in a really well-paying company just to be able to pay that loan. Forget about, whatever savings he's got is a separate story. But for this master to take a call which might get him out of a job, and I'm saying that if he's getting pressurized by a company, I'm not talking about the ideal companies. I'm talking about a company who does not probably, if that happens.
It's the same master.
Right.
He's taken out a big loan, and he goes into an unsafe situation, and something goes wrong.
No, of course, that's not
then
acceptable.
what happens to that 4 lakh EMI?
Right. Absolutely.
So you always pick up the safest. It's a risk assessment he has to do.
It's a risk assessment that he has to do.
And then again, let us say the company keeps him in the job.
Right.
Something goes wrong, and somebody else has to pay the price for it, for his own EMI and the guilt that he lived with.
Yeah.
Because of his own EMI, somebody else has to suffer.
True.
Is that a price to pay? So
No, I completely get that. All I'm saying is that these are probably some of the dilemmas that, and I agree with that probably, I don't know if you feel this way, but do you think that masters are getting promoted too soon and too early for their maturity? Because what you are saying is totally, I'm totally with that. But that's with 8 years of experience as a master and having been through some of the companies I've been fortunate enough to sail with companies who have been absolutely the way you said. The safety department doesn't compromise on commercial matters. But I'm saying there are maybe other companies where they do compromise, and then unless you're a master with a substantial experience to take a decision, it might be a challenge, is all I'm saying. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm saying that they might feel that pressure, that commercial pressure, which many masters have felt it at one point of time or the other. Even the senior ones, I have heard it from numerous masters that there's always a commercial pressure. There's always, you cannot really, you cannot let go of the commercial pressure. But the point, what happens, I feel, with a little bit of maturity is that you take commercial pressure as a part of your job, but don't compromise on safety because of this. It's not a trade-off. This differentiation probably happens in a more mature stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. And maturity again is a very, very different subject. Some people are mature at 18.
Sure.
Some never mature.
So overwhelmingly, what came across from what you just said is that no matter what happens, whether you're newly promoted, whether you're under pressure, or whatever the reason is, as a master, never ever compromise on, and always exercise that authority, that overriding authority which you have.
Yes, to sum it up, I would say that master not only has responsibility and authority and responsibility towards the company, but he also has responsibility towards his crew members,
Right.
their families, then towards the industry,
Right.
and towards society at large.
At large.
So he cannot ignore that responsibility,
Right.
whatever be the EMI.
Right. Absolutely. That's a very, very strong message, Captain Narang. I'm extremely pleased to have this. I mean, I think we touched upon a number of topics which I'm sure you agree that would be very, very relevant for people to understand and know. And that was the whole point of it anyways, because an informal discussion on the topics which you have seen over so many years. Obviously, I know that 40 years of experience, it's not enough time to capture all what you have, but I'm really, really glad to have touched upon so many things with you and to get your perspectives on valuable perspective on so many different things. Thank you so much. Thank you. Incredible pleasure and honor to have you here. I mean, at some point of time, I was sailing for India's team ship when you were in the safety department. So we have also worked together. It's a privilege to have worked with you. And I know for a fact how the kind of integrity and that kind of, belief that you brought in the organization, because we could feel it. I mean, I was not there for a very long time in that company, but we could feel, and that sort of points to that same message which you said, that it filters down from the top management, how much confidence they give you as a seafarer to sort of take the right calls. So thank you so much. Thank you so much once again. And it was a very big pleasure for us.
Thank you, Captain Basu. It was a pleasure talking to you. And a lot of thoughts which were probably there in the subconscious, they also came out today. Because of this discussion with you, it's clarified my own attitude towards safety a bit today, having this discussion with you. And I hope the seafarers who see it, they'll have something to gain from it.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Captain Basu.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.